From a group of kids playing Dungeons and Dragons in a basement in 1983 to the literal destruction of an entire alternate dimension, and the supposed death of one of the most powerful beings on the planet, here is everything about Stranger Things that still keeps me up at night. Let's start with Will, because honestly, his arc in Season 5 was one of the most fascinating developments in the entire series. This kid has been through absolute hell since Episode 1. He was taken by the Demogorgon, trapped in the Upside Down, used as a vessel for the Mind Flayer, and spent years trying to just be normal while this connection to another dimension kept pulling him back. And what Season 5 finally confirmed is that Will was never really free of that connection. He thought he was, we all thought he was, after they burned the Mind Flayer out of him in that sauna back in Season 3. But the show made it crystal clear that his link to the hive mind never actually went away. It was dormant. Sure, but it was always there, waiting. The way Robin describes it in Season 5 is perfect. She calls Will a radio receiver, and that analogy really does explain everything about how his powers work. He's not generating anything, he's picking up signals. Every time a creature from the Upside Down gets close enough, every time Vecna makes a move, Will's body responds because it's still tuned to that frequency. And here's the thing that really gets me. The show explicitly tells us that Will's connection was reactivated multiple times. First, when he came back to Hawkins from California, then again when the gates reopened. His goosebumps, his visions, his ability to see through the Demogorgon's eyes, all of it points to the fact that Will Byers is permanently linked to this other dimension in ways that might not ever be fully severed. But then Season 5 takes it even further. Will doesn't just receive signals anymore, he starts sending them. When Vecna corners the group and the Mac Z and the Demogorgons are about to kill everyone, Will taps into something deep, something connected to all those years of trauma and fear and suppressed emotions, and he takes control of the creatures. He freezes them mid-attack, levitates them, and kills them by twisting their limbs the exact same way Vecna kills his victims. That's Will using the hive mind as a weapon. And here's where it gets really interesting. When Will confronts Vecna in Henry's memory, when he's trying to help Holly and Max escape, Vecna tells him something crucial. He says that the Mind Flayer didn't control him, and he didn't control it. They chose each other, their partners. But Will? Will was a vessel, just like Vecna was when he first encountered the Mind Flayer particles in that briefcase as a kid. The difference is that Will never chose to embrace it. He fought against it. He let his friends and family burn it out of him. But the connection remained because you can't just delete something that's fundamental from your existence. So what does this mean going forward? Well, think about it. The Upside Down is gone, the bridge collapsed when Nancy shot the exotic matter, and Murray's bomb went off. Everything inside that dimension got swept out into the void of space, according to the finale. But Will's connection wasn't to a place, it was to the hive mind itself, and we have zero confirmation that the hive mind was completely destroyed. The Mind Flayer's physical form, the giant spider creature that Vecna was using as his lair, collapsed and burned when Elle and the group attacked it. Vecna himself got decapitated, but the actual consciousness, the actual hive mind that connected all these creatures together, that's a lot harder to kill. Remember back in Season 2 when the Mind Flayer first appeared? It wasn't a physical being in our dimension. It was this massive shadow entity that existed in the Upside Down. And the scientists at Hawkins' lab had been aware of it for years. Dr. Owens talks about how they'd been monitoring it, how it seemed to be the controlling intelligence behind everything in the Upside Down. And even after they closed the gate at the end of Season 2, the Mind Flayer found a way to create a physical form using rats and people in Season 3. It adapted. It survived having its connection to the Upside Down severed by building something new on our side. So who's to say it can't do that again? And if it can, then Will Byers is still walking around with a direct line to whatever remains of that intelligence. The show ends with him seemingly normal, graduating high school, playing one last D&D campaign with his friends. But his powers didn't disappear. We saw him use them in the climactic battle. We saw him tap into something that shouldn't exist anymore. And the Duffers don't show us that without reason. My theory is that as long as Will exists, as long as that link remains active, the hive mind has a way back. Not necessarily Vecna, because that guy is definitely dead. Joyce made absolutely sure of that. But the Mind Flayer as a concept, as an entity, might still be out there in some form, waiting for the right moment to re-establish contact, and Will would be the first person it reaches out to. There's also the question of what Will's powers actually are now, because what he did in that final battle wasn't just using the hive mind against itself. He was doing things that looked an awful lot like what 11 can do. The telekinesis, the control over living beings, the way his nose bled afterward. Those are all hallmarks of the Hawkins lab experiments. And while Will was never one of Brenner's subjects, he spent significant time connected to a being that was created in part from those experiments. The mind flayer that possessed him had absorbed particles of Henry Creel's consciousness. Henry, who was the original experiment. Henry, who could control minds and manipulate reality before anyone else. It's entirely possible that Will's time as a vessel didn't just leave him with a connection to the hive mind. It might have changed his neurology in the same way that exposure to Henry's blood changed the children in Brenner's program. Will might be, in his own way, another number. Not created through deliberate experimentation, but through trauma and exposure and survival. And if that's true, then the government would absolutely want to get their hands on him. Which brings us to 11, and the question that the finale deliberately leaves unanswered. Is she actually dead? Let's talk about what we see happen. The Upside Down is collapsing, the bomb is about to go off, and Elle slips away from the group to stay behind. She has her tearful goodbye with Mike in his mindscape. She stands at the Mac Z gate as everyone screams for her in slow motion. And then the explosion happens. The Upside Down is gone. And where the gate once stood is just the ruins of Hawkins' library. That's what we're shown. That's what everyone's faces are devastated. The scene cuts to black. 18 months later, 11 is nowhere to be seen in the epilogue. Mike is mourning her at the memorial. Hopper has accepted that she's gone. It all seems pretty definitive, except then Mike presents his theory and the show literally shows us 11 alive and hiking toward those 3 waterfalls she dreamed about. Now here's where I need to be careful because the show is intentionally ambiguous about this. Mike explicitly says he doesn't know if it's real. He says he chooses to believe it, and his friends choose to believe it with him. The Duffers are leaving it up to interpretation, but that they're also giving us enough evidence to make a real case that 11 survived. And that case is built on one crucial element: Callie's powers. Think about what Callie can do. She creates illusions. Not just little tricks, but full-scale visual deceptions that can fool anyone. We saw this back in Season 2 when she helped Elle see memories of her mother. We saw it again in Season 5 when she disguised herself from the military and when Vecna used similar techniques to trick Hopper into thinking Elle was dying in the tank. Illusions in this world are powerful enough to affect reality in meaningful ways. Now think about the timing. The military had those hedgehog devices activated, the ones that emit the frequency that neutralizes Elle's powers. Mike specifically remembers hearing that same frequency at the graduation ceremony, which triggers his memory of Elle's death. And he realizes something doesn't add up. If those machines were on, if Elle's powers were being suppressed, then how was she standing so upright and strong at the threshold of the gate when the Upside Down exploded? She couldn't have been. Not if the hedgehogs were active, which means what everyone saw might not have been Elle at all. Kaylee died in the finale, but remember that conversation she had with Elle earlier? She told Elle that they should stay behind together, that sacrificing themselves was the only way to truly end the cycle of government persecution. She believed that as long as Elle existed, she would be hunted. But then Hopper talked Elle down. That emotional scene in Hawkins' lab where he refused to let her throw her life away, where he made her see that her death wouldn't actually solve anything. Elle backed away from the suicide plan. She wanted to live. So what if Callie, in her final moments, decided to give Elle that chance? What if she used the last of her strength to project an illusion of Elle standing at the gate, while the real Elle escaped through some other route? It would explain why Elle appeared so serene in that final shot. It would explain how she could be standing there with hedgehogs blaring. And it would fit perfectly with Callie's character arc, sacrificing herself not to end the cycle through death, but to give her sister a chance at the freedom she never had. The show doesn't confirm this, but it doesn't deny it either, and that's the genius of how the Duffers handled the ending. They gave us just enough evidence to believe that Elle survived, while also making it plausible that Mike is just coping with grief by telling himself a comforting story. Both interpretations are valid. Both are supported by what we see on screen. But here's why I personally lean toward Elle being alive. First, narratively, it makes more sense. Elle's entire arc has been about finding her place in the world, finding her identity beyond being a weapon. She spent 5 seasons learning how to be a person, how to have friends and family, and a life that wasn't defined by her powers. Having her die in a sacrificial explosion would be thematically consistent in some ways, but it would also be a pretty bleak ending for a character who deserved better. Second, the waterfalls. Those three waterfalls were established way back in season 5 when Mike and Elle had their conversation on the roof of the radio station. Mike talked about how in his D&D about campaigns, the party always rides off to start fresh somewhere new after defeating evil, somewhere like a land with three waterfalls. Elle connected to that image. She wanted that ending, and the finale literally shows her walking toward those exact waterfalls. That's not an accident. The Duffers don't include imagery like that without meaning. Third, and this is the most compelling evidence to me, Dr. K's program. Remember what Kaylee revealed in season 5? Kay wasn't just hunting 11. She was trying to restart Brenner's experiments. She had captured women, impregnated them, and was infusing them with Callie's blood, trying to create new superpowered children. The program was already in motion. Elle's capture would have accelerated it, but her death doesn't necessarily stop it. This is huge, and I don't think enough people are talking about it. The cycle of creating powered children didn't start with Brenner, and it doesn't end with Kay. This is clearly an ongoing government interest that spans decades. They wanted Elle because she was the closest match to Henry's original bloodline, but they were already proving they could attempt to create others without her. The experiments were happening whether Elle was involved or not. So if Elle is alive, if she's out there somewhere in hiding, then she's still a target. And if Will's powers continue to develop, if his connection to the hive mind remains active, then he becomes a target too. The government now knows that people can be created or transformed to have these abilities. They're not going to stop trying just because Kay's initial plan failed. I also want to talk about something that I think is underappreciated in the finale, which is the briefcase scene in Henry's memories. When Holly and Max discover the truth about how Henry first encountered the Mind Flayer, we see this moment where a young Henry opens a briefcase belonging to a dying scientist, and inside is some kind of dark matter that gives him a vision of the Mind Flayer particles in the abyss. The particles whisper, "Find me," to him, and that's when everything starts. This is massive lore that the show kind of glosses over in the finale. Where did that briefcase come from? Who was that scientist? What was he doing with Mind Flayer particles before anyone knew the Upside Down existed? Was the government already aware of this other dimension before Elle even made contact with the Demogorgon in 1983? Because that would change everything we thought we knew about the timeline. This brings me to one more mystery about Holly Wheeler. This poor kid went through absolute hell in season 5. She was manipulated by Vecna, posing as an imaginary friend, watched her mother get mauled by a Demogorgon, got abducted to another dimension, spent days trapped in a psychological prison made from Henry Creel's memories, nearly got killed multiple times, and was used as part of a ritual to merge dimensions. The show ends with Holly apparently fine, running down to the basement to play her first D&D campaign with friends while Mike watches from the stairs. It's a sweet full circle moment. The next generation of Hawkins kids ready for their own adventures. But is Holly actually fine? Think about what happened to the other children who spent extended time in Vecna's mindscape. Max was in a coma for nearly 2 years and came out with physical motor impairment that required months of rehabilitation. And Max is a teenager who had context for what was happening, who understood the Upside Down and Vecna's nature. Holly was 8 years old, had no idea who Henry Creel really was until Max explained it, and was actively used as a vessel for Vecna's ritual. The Mind Flayer particles were forced down her throat. She had tentacles lodged inside her. When she escaped her spire, she vomited up those particles, but does that mean they're completely gone? Will kept a connection to the hive mind for years after his exorcism. Who's to say Holly won't? Who's to say? Experience similar lingering effects? Even if she has no supernatural connection remaining, she's going to need serious therapy.